Yeah, I think we
Okay.
can. So, okay, thank you everyone for coming to our presentation about 3D multiplayer game using procedural content generation. So, before we start our presentation for real, let me start off with some of the warm-up question. So, maybe can you try to list three roguelike games, so three games in a roguelike genre? Some people may be able to come up with this pretty much instantly, but well, most of the people, I think, find it relatively simple to list like three roguelike games. Some of them are, for example, Risk of Rain, Inscription, Binding of Isaac. Some people might say Vampire Survivors. But yeah, this is relatively simple question for many of the players. Then how about we go to the next question? Can you try to list three multiplayer competitive games? This, I think, is probably for me even more easier than like the first one, right? Most of them are actually fall into like the esport category: Valorant, League of Legends, Rocket League. Most of these are pretty much most of these are competitive games which are found in esport category, and pretty much most people actually do know them. But how about the next question? So can you try to list three games that are both roguelike and multiplayer competitive? This one might seem a little bit more trickier than the first two because it's kind of a difficult to come up with one because well there are not this is like this game like this is like a combination of genre that people have yet to jump into, right? It's the kind of genre that's not a lot of people actually jump into. There's nothing wrong with like combining genre in the first place. I think most of the video games actually combine genres, but it sometimes can be a bit tricky when you combine genres that are vastly different, like roguelike and multiplayer competitive game. Coincidentally or not, most of our project actually involves around combinations, especially combining technology, for example, procedural content generations with multiplayer games. And as you've seen later, combining genres, for example, to create like an interesting interplay between mechanics of different genre and also being able to exploit the gaps in the market. Now, I want you to give a bit of a brief game description of what we actually do. We want to create a match-based first-person shooter, roguelike competitive game, where in one match, the player would race against each other to gather resources and upgrade their weapon to become strong enough to actually become the first to actually beat the final boss in order to win the game. We also wanted to use procedural content generation to increase the replayability of the game that we're trying to make. So we procedurally generate content such as maps and terrains. Now we talk about game design, how we actually come up with these ideas, how we come up with this concept, what are the main components that we thought a lot about when designing our game. First, we look into how we think about our target audience because it allows us to kind of narrow down what mechanics would interest what kind of users, right? So what we use is we use Bartol taxonomies, which classifies the player into four different types: the killer, achiever, socializer, and explorers. The two of which we are interested in would be, the first one would be the killers. So the killer is defined by the word disruptive. They want to disrupt other players' gameplay. For example, most competitive game follow these usually cater to these kind of players. The other is the achievers, right? Achievers focus on the objectives. They wanted to play a game that has a clear objective that provides them a reward. For example, leaderboard game is a mechanic that caters to many of these achiever players. So we also consider how the player should feel when we're playing our game. So, for example, the player should be feeling destructive. We want the player to actually go out and actually try to defeat enemies, defeat bosses and final bosses, mini bosses, whatever. So yeah, we want the player to feel destructive, to destroy things. We also want the player to feel smart. We want the player to actually be able to strategize on, okay, how do I beat this game more efficiently? So we come up with these four design concepts. First is that the game should be disruptive. The player should be allowed to disrupt other players' progresses. The game should be based on multiple successive objectives. The player should be able to strategize and come up with how I should play the game more efficiently. And the game should be highly replayable. Which then we come to the core of our game design, three of the objectives, challenges, and rewards. The objective of the game is simple. You have to be the first to actually beat the final boss, who actually wins the game. But that on its own isn't very fun, right? We have to have challenges. What are the challenges in our game? Well, since the game is actually match-based, so we are match player into a match, the player will actually start off relatively weak compared to the player at the end of the match. So the player will actually have to fight bosses and enemies in order to upgrade the weapons and upgrade their characters in order to become stronger to actually beat the final boss. The player also have to fight other players, because other players can also try to, and the game actually provide many mechanics to actually sabotage other players. So yeah, these are the two main challenges that are actually presented in the game. At the end of the game, though, the player will be rewarded with in-game currencies, which they can use to buy skin and cosmetics within the game, and there will be achievement for them to obtain as well.
With the player emotion and key design concept broken down, we will move on to additional information about the player's core drive to get a better understanding of why a player would play the game. We broke down the player's drive into two main core drives using the Octalysis framework. The first core drive is development and accomplishment. This drive focuses on having a clear goal for the player to progress toward while overcoming challenges like other players. The second core drive is unpredictability and curiosity. Games that use this core drive relies a lot on randomization and procedural content. Players will face challenges that require problem solving and decision-making skills. And as previously stated, our main selling point is the genre mixing between roguelike and competitive multiplayer, which we haven't seen much on the market. As the development progresses, we may find additional hooks for our game, for example, hooks that involve with the exploration of art style and or satisfying game feel. But for now, our selling point will focus on this unusual genre blending.
Okay, so now let's move on to the mechanics of our games. Next. These are the list of the mechanics that we have incorporated into our games, and I will tell you like each of them one by one. So first, next. After player found a match through matchmaking, they will be able to choose a character. Every character will have two unique abilities, which are normal skill and ultimate skill. The normal skill will have less cooldown with less utility that will mostly affect only the players themselves, while the ultimate skill have more cooldown but provide more utility and effect, like large area effect that affect the other players as well. For instance, activating the normal skill provides information about the enemies into random adjacent area from the current location with a cooldown of 60 seconds. The ultimate skill disables the minimap and enemy health gauges for all other players for 30 seconds with a cooldown of 180 seconds. The main mechanism of combat involves using guns as the main weapons, with players having the option to utilize character skills to aid themselves with the enemies in battle. We create a character skill mechanic to hope that the players will fit the players' diverse play style. Next. After they start a match, they will be facing with the enemies. Enemies, including the mini bosses and final boss, are each associated with specific elemental types, with normal enemies having 0 to 1 elemental type, mini boss having 1, and the final boss having 3. By defeating enemies that have an element, players have a chance to obtain the elemental chart of the same element, which players can then use a certain amount of it to infuse their weapon with that same element. By incorporating this mechanic, players must adapt their strategies based on the enemy's attributes, as dealing damage with a winning element will deal more damage to the enemies. When players deal damage to the enemy, they will be engaged with our next mechanic, the gauge system. Our gauge system will be something like the style rank system of Devil May Cry, where the rank increases when players perform consecutive actions to the enemies. As you can see, like the rank increase from B to A and to S when the players perform combo to the enemies. Next. Our gauge mechanic is very similar to that of Devil May Cry style rank. The gauge mechanic is tied to combat engagement, with players earning gauge point by dealing damage or like execute some actions to the enemies. These points contribute to more XP multiplier when players defeat enemies, providing an added layer of reward for skillful and strategic gameplay of the players. After players kill some monster and get enough EXP, they will be leveled up, and that's when our next mechanic comes into play. Upon leveling up, players will be presented a choice of 3 skill cards to choose. These cards offer enhancement to the character, skills, and ultimate abilities, or they can choose to increase the passive status boost. The cards will be presented to the players at a random chance. Next. Our skill card system will be something like this vampire server system where after player level up, they will be able to choose one skill. This mechanic will add more unpredictability to the game to make the game more refreshing to the players. Next. After the game goes for a while, now players will start to meet each other in the map. To encourage player versus player engagement, a Bloodlust mechanic has been introduced. Bloodlust is a buff status acquired when a player defeats another player. This mechanic serves to promote the player versus player interactions. While the specific effects of the Bloodlust are still in development, the initial concepts, including granting a temporary boost to damage output for the duration of time. This buff might also enhance the speed or agility temporarily, which is gradually wearing off over time. However, this state could come with a reduced defense, making the player more vulnerable to the incoming attacks, emphasizing the mechanic risky nature. Aside from leveling up and defeating other players, player can also get stronger by defeating mini-boss as well. Next. Mini-bosses are more difficult compared to regular enemies, but are designed to be more manageable than the final boss. Typically, it takes less than a minute to defeat. After player defeated a mini-boss, player will obtain a weapon, which will provide a strategic advantages for the players. We incorporate this mini-boss to add a depth and progression to the gameplay experience before player will face the final boss. Next. The final boss stands as the ultimate goal for players to win the match. Players can access to this final boss through the teleportation area, which will be located around the center of the map. The boss hill and the challenge room are separated for all players, ensuring a fair yet challenging experience for the players. And that's all of our mechanics. Now we will go through our development part. First, I will show you our character controller. So now player can moving mouse to rotate the camera. Player can move by pressing WASD to move up, down, left, and right. Next. Player can press spacebar to jump and left click of the mouse to shoot. Next. And this is so far the demo of our game. I will show you how our development goes. So as you can see, we can move in the world that are generated by PCG. And as you can see, the other window, the player can move as well, and the two screen of the player's movement are synced. So next, I will show you how we interact with the enemies. So now I will spawn the enemies, and I will try and shooting the enemies. As you can see, the enemy will have the health bar above, and when I shoot, the health will reduce, and if it doesn't have any more health, it will die. So this is our progress so far, and that's it.
Okay, we are working using Unity Engine as the main system, which use C# programming language. Our target OS for the current product is Windows. Since Unity also support compiling game in other OSs, in the future, we can build the product on other OSs as well. And now we will move on into the development of procedural content generation in our game. What we aim to achieve using this is to create a fun and unpredictable gameplay that is different in every time that player play the game. We'll be using a method called the height map method, which includes using a function to generate noise map, processing them to height map, then converting them into a playable mesh as terrain with colliders and renderers. We have experimented with many parameters for the noise map to get a result that best resemble mountainous terrain. Some example of the parameters include persistence and lacunarity of the noise map. Different values reflect different texture and roughness of the terrain. Another technique that we are using is using the level of details to optimize the process. This allows the game to run smoother as less information is needed for further areas. For example, the closest area to the player will have highest resolution mesh, which have colliders, while the outer perimeter mesh will have lower resolution with no colliders at all. And this image shows the seam between each level of details. The difference between each resolution can be clearly illustrated, as lower level of details meshes use magnitudes less computing power. And since the seam is often placed in further perimeter, it is hard to notice the irregularity. However, it is good to know that this technique has some downside in both terms of performance and design. Since this is used for open space terrain, large numbers of objects can be seen and will have to be rendered at any time, which includes structures, enemy, and decorative objects such as grasses, which can easily total over 10,000 of meshes. Since this technique is new to us, optimizing the technique to make it work well will be quite challenging. And in terms of design, why it offers a large open world area, it is simply empty. Along with the restriction of having no overhanging terrain, it can lead to uninteresting gameplay. There are some alternatives that solve those issues, like having using web function collapse or its derivative to generate a room-based dungeon terrain. Since it is not an open world environment, uninteresting objects that cannot be seen can be easily filtered out more clearly. So there are fewer objects to deal with in terms of performance. However, this also requires more work in terms of building a connectable base room that will be used. And so far, this algorithm needs more time to research. So we will not be going into details about it in this presentation.
So now we're going to be talking a little bit about multiplayer and networking. Since we are making multiplayer games, we need a networking solution. And the first one that we're actually bringing in is actually netcode for game object, which is a package native to Unity. Unity provided for free. And it actually provides multiple ways for developers to actually synchronize multiple types of data. For example, they can synchronize precision, can synchronize rotation. That allows us to do physics with rigid body. They also expose many APIs such as network variable or remote procedural call to actually have a lower level control on the logic of the game for more complex logic of the game. But netcode alone doesn't actually synchronize data across the internet. So we need another services to actually help synchronize this data across multiple players across the internet. So in this case, we bring a unique game service which actually provides multiple things. First, it actually provides the multiplayer, which is the dedicated server hosting on the cloud, which we can use for hosting our servers. Many games actually uses this service. For example, Apex Legends uses this, Among Us uses this. Then we have Cloud Save, which acts as a database. We have Matchmaker, which is a matchmaking services, and then an identity provider, which is an authentication services. Now we're on the project management part of the presentation. In this case, we have finished the initiation phase of the project, which is where we come up with game ideas. And now we have entered the iteration phase where we design and develop our games with multiple iterations. In this case, in each iteration, there will be a design development phase. And then at the end of each iteration, there will be a testing phase, which is conducted in a small groups of people, of target audiences. And then at the end of the project, there will be more open testing, more open to the public, and more open to more people. This is the project timeline. So this is very complicated. So I'm just going to simplify it for you. And we have tried to prioritize tasks, group and prioritize tasks based on how they are related to the objective, challenges, and rewards of the game. These are the team members. So currently the roles and responsibility are grouped and selected based on how important it is. So the most important tasks right now are procedural content generation, cloud and network, and also game mechanics and enemies development. So these are our role and responsibility for now, which might change as the project progresses. So to summarize, we want to make a first-person shooter roguelike competitive game where the player races to kill the final boss first. We designed a concept based on these four design points, and what we're trying to do is that we try to use the combination of multiple technologies, for example, procedural content generation in multiplayers and using combination of multiple genre to actually create an interesting gameplay and interesting mechanics that would exploit the gap in the market for the player to actually play them. And that is it for our presentation. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. Thank you.
Yes, please ask questions. Professor Setha, do you have any questions?
Oh, I'd like to ask about the scope because from listening to your concept, it seems like a complicated game. At the end of March, what do you expect to achieve? Is it the whole game or prototype, or what level would you be expecting?
So I think what we're trying to expect, I think we try to achieve the whole game, but some of the, like, for example, characters, or maybe there will be, okay, we would try to execute the whole game, the game rules, we would try to complete them, but some of the aspect that could be reduced, for example, how many characters or how many skills or how many bosses design and enemies design we have would be greatly reduced, maybe to like a 1 or 2 design, like for like each of the enemy type, for example, and the biome would be greatly reduced, but we will try to kind of just finish the whole game. But if we can, we have already prioritized the list of things that we could try to cut out if we're like really low on time. Yeah.
And do you plan to have it play online by multiple players? Will you put the game into a network host somewhere?
Yes, we try to we try to use a Unity gaming service to actually have a dedicated server hosting for us. But if we deem that way too complicated, or if we deem that we are really low on time, we also have other alternatives. For example, AWS GameLift is another solution for dedicated gaming server hosting. Or if we are really low on time, we could also use Unity Relay, which is like a much more simpler version, which does not use dedicated server hosting, but allows the player to actually connect it to each other directly, and is a lot more simple than actually using Unity game service. But yeah, to answer your question, yeah, we did plan to actually have like a dedicated server.
Okay. Um, hmm. My suggestion is because towards the end, hold on, let me read the report. I think the plan is to have volunteer to test it. So it's not just you guys testing it. You will get some people to test it. So at that stage, the game needs to be ready to play. I'm not sure with the cut and the potential limitation, will it affect the result of the testing, the satisfaction, and yeah, those things. So I suggest that you plan along what I don't know whether you want to test the whole game or let them test sections of the games. And then you need to think about the question you want to ask them.
Okay, thank you.
And with the timeline here, are you on time at the moment?
Currently, not really. Yeah, we are facing problems right now. We try to be on time as much as possible. But yeah.
Yeah, I'm a little bit worried about the time you have, because you have about 4 months to complete the whole thing. And I don't know, if problems arises or more problems arise, will you be able to like scope down with the student
Yeah,
like
I think the
the
students should
features and
make
things in the
a
game?
minimal specification of the game. So I think you guys should scope the minimum specs, the minimum size of the game,
Yeah.
and achieve that size. If you can achieve more, that's fine. But since you're not clear on the minimum size at the moment, so we are a bit unsure.
Yeah,
So
maybe work on that first.
yeah.
Absolute minimum. Yeah.
Well, actually, I do have a thing of the minimum. So the minimum will be like, for sure, player will be able to play with each other, but we may remove the character skills and the skill cards. So player will be able to like shoot the monster to kill the monster and gain XP and level up and kill each other, and then like go to the center of the map to actually kill the final boss, and that's it. So like the things that we plan to have a minimum of things that we plan to have is like a multiplayer that can shoot each other, shoot the enemy to level up and to kill the boss.
I'm not sure. I think you can do more than that.
Yes.
I think you can do more than that.
I
think that's too minimal.
Yeah, we also think we can do more than that, but that's very minimal.
Very, very minimal.
Yeah, but we plan to do more than that for sure if we can.
And with the network deployment, can you just sign up and put the game on the network straight away? Is there lead time needed to put them on the network? One of the three options that you said.
I'm not sure about the Unity Relay, which is like the last option yet, but I have tried using like the multiplayer, which is a dedicated server hosting for provided officially by Unity, and there currently we have to actually have a dedicated dedicated server built of the game, which we currently are a little bit struggling to find because there's some problem with the graphics. So yeah, there will be a lead time before you can actually deploy a dedicated server onto a multiplayer service for sure. And yeah, if we really didn't have time, we would move on. I have to do some research, and a lot of people have said that it's very, very simple to do compared to like multiplayer. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
That's all for me for now.
Then Ampere, do you have any questions?
Yes, please. Okay. So can you hear me, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, sure. So first of all, thanks for very interesting presentation and of course the game architecture. Okay, I will ask you like very simple questions first. So who is your target audience in this game? Who is your target audience? It is kind of someone like who has already game experience, or like is a absolute beginner, like to be able to play your game, right? Whether they should have some experiences to a certain level, or a totally new absolute beginner. So what is your target audience, and also do you have any age limitation to play the game, or like gender specific, something like this? Yeah.
Okay, so the target audience, I think, is catered towards those that are a little bit more experienced with the FPS and also roguelike mechanic, I think, because these are the game is it contains a lot of heavy mechanics, which I think are only those who actually have played the game to a certain level will actually understand them, because there are multiple types of gun, multiple types of elements. There are sprinting, something like that, which I think will be more catered towards those who have actually played FPS game, I think. And for the age restricted, I think it's depend on like the art style of the game as well. We want the game to be destructive, but also I think it's also depend on the art style as well as how we would design the look and feel of the game, which we haven't got to that point yet. And the gender, I don't think there's any gender specific. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, okay, that's fine. So like according to what you have just said, so your game might be complicated, right? So
Yeah.
it is targeting for like more experienced players. So in this situation, will you include like some tutorials or like the documentation or help system? How do you think?
At this stage, I think what we actually should have like a tutorial, but looking at like the scope of the like the timeline of the game, it is very, very difficult to actually include them. If we try to include them maybe as like a documentation, I think that would be like the fastest way, but I don't think it's the most appropriate way. If we really can, we would try to make like a stage for it, like that we could kind of guide the player through. James or Vice, do you have any suggestion at all?
I think the best way to guide the player through is at least having some kind of interactive like playthrough at first, like kind of like Apex Legend, where you where the player is introduced to a very simple mechanic like movement and shooting guns.
Right.
But yeah, looking at the time scope, it's gonna be quite challenging.
So in this case, like I think the documentation may be useful as well. Yeah, some kind of documentation if you really cannot implement the tutorial system. Yeah, so you can
Or
think about
the documentation can be, integrated into the tutorial level. So when your character go up to something, then you have the documentation, just portion of the documentation come up, something like that.
That is true. Yeah.
okay. Okay, that is great. So the next question is okay, you have already explained like briefly about this, like okay, there are many genres in the game in industry in the market, right? So what made you excited about like a blending or like mixing two genres like together, which are like competitive multiplayer and roguelike games, like why did you decide to choose like two genres in your project? Yeah.
For roguelike and competitive specifically, I think one of the things that makes us excited is because we try to find the game that is fall into this genre, and it's very hard to find one. I think the only one game that we found was Crawl, and that was like it was like a 2D dungeon crawler game, which it looks exciting, and we think to ourselves, yeah, this looks really good, and we wanted to try to kind of just progress this game with like a different role, different mechanics into our game, which is like a first-person shooter, and mix other stuff, role playing as well, into like the genre that we choose.
So what you mean is like we have more market opportunity,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So if you can roll out such kind of like the mixture of like two genres, so you may have more market opportunities, and of course for the monetization, the revenue part, right? So you may have more opportunity, which is really good. I mean, like research get market opportunity and so on. All right, so the next part is your one game mechanic, right? You mentioned about the blood lust. Why did you choose this mechanic? And like among other like mechanics, like why did you choose this specific game? Yeah, this one. And how it will make your game more engaging and more like enjoyable to play, or like more competitive, something like this playability part. Yeah, gameplay experience.
In my opinion, I think there are like two main type of players, right? The one that like to achieve something in the game, and the other type is the type that like to disrupt the others, like player what who love like killing the other players. So these kind of players are like easy to engage with the other player because they want to interact with other players. But the first type, which is the like achiever, they want to they only kill some monster and kill the boss. They are less likely to engage with the other players. So, but this type of player want to like achieve like things faster in the game. So we use the bloodlust to make them interact with each other with the other players. Since like if they get the bloodlust status, they will like it will make them progress faster in the game. So that make me think that like it will promote the player versus player interaction for the achiever as well.
Okay, yeah, all right. So that's fine. Okay, so the next, one of the interesting, like, the term that you mentioned in your report and also, of course, in your presentation, which is replayability, right? So why do you think replayability is important in your game?
One of them is just the first. I think that one of the most important aspect in video game that a lot of people have overlooked is monetization. I think the fact that people come back to play our game can and keep updating our game, of course, and increase the replayability of our game allows us to kind of just make more money. So for game that has the highest replayability games that are competitive, for example, Valorant example, people are still playing it every day. CSGO, people are still playing it every day, right? Because the game has higher replayability, and they set up like a shop or like a marketplace for people to actually buy guns, buy items. So it's one way that we kind of just like introduce a way to keep making more money. I think that's one of the answer that I could give you. Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. It's a good answer. Okay, so the next one is like a procedural content generation, right? So you use that kind of like strategy, the game design in your game, right? So how will you make sure the game performance is like good, and also it may not cause any lagging or like performance issue when players are playing the game? How will you make sure when you are applying such kind of a procedural content generation?
I think the most important thing to optimize is to optimize the number of objects that are currently visible to player and that player can interact with. And while using like which there are many ways to do. Like for having an open world, it can be as easy as by occluding like excluding objects that are far enough from player that player will definitely don't interact with. But the another way is by knowing exactly where the player are and exclude the chunk that is like that is also is not relevant. And why this is like similar to what I said earlier. The reason that it's different is that this is not open. The latter method is not open world, so it is easier to occlude as from just by player not seeing them. So and I think that's one of the way to optimize it. And another thing that can be an issue in games like this is also networking. Not only in terms of like rendering and stuff, but networking also. We have to know what object that we want to sync with each other player, and to minimize the number of objects that need to be synced will be very important for the performance as well.
Okay, that sounds great. Yeah, so since you have already taken into consideration all these important factors, then like you can start preparing for this in your development part. Okay, so my next question, second last, have you already considered about the ethical standpoint and also the security part of your game system? So how will you make sure your game system is ethical in terms of collecting user data and stuff, and also like the security part, like how will you make sure?
So So what you mean is that like how like about the privacy right of the data or something like that? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, privacy privacy is also important because like they may have their user data, like maybe like their financial information, whatever if they have to purchase something from your game, the market or your store. The other part is like, will you collect the user data, like the user playability information? I'm not sure, like how do you have that kind of things?
So okay, let me answer like one question at a time. So about I think the security and safety of the data. So the Unity what do you call it? Identity provider actually provides a way to like use authentication and other authentication service using like Facebook, Google as well. So in terms of like the authentication data, we do not need to collect like as much as we like. We don't have to like mess with like users' email, for example. We can just let like the Unity service do everything, and we can just kind of just use them instead of like having to handle like the very secret data themselves. Ourselves, I mean, and the other question is that what kind of information we'll be collecting. So I think the information that we could collect would be something like an achievement, right? And maybe something like the amount of currency the player actually has. So we'll be collecting them using Cloud Save, which is again a cloud service on Unity. So we will try collect as little information as possible because I don't think it will be necessary to actually like, for example, contain the email of a user or something like that. Just let authentication service handle it, and the information that we have to like on a Cloud Save is just like in-game information like currency, achievement, something like that.
Okay. All right. And do you also have like, the kind of like the age restriction for the player? For example, like, do you have PG rating or whatever in your game system for the target users?
Currently not yet. Currently
Okay.
not yet.
All right, because like I can see some kind of violence to some level, so you may consider about this as well. All right, okay, my last question, it was just very short. Why do you think why should I play your game? Can you answer it? Once you finish, why should I have like many options out there, like, but why should I play your game?
One answer is that you have like a unique experience of playing game in like a completely different combination of genre. I think it's the combination of the intensity of roguelike and the intensity of the competitive game that makes a game even more intense and more, I don't know, it's more intense and more violent than ever. I think it's like the unique experience of having to play like a game in this genre that you may want to play our game. And it's also like a game. It also like a combination of multiple genre, like because like for example, if you look at other roguelike competitive games such as Crawl, it's like a 2D game. Sure, maybe you like to play 2D game, but like we also try to make it a 3D FPS game. So that's one of the reasons that our game is trying to be unique as possible, and that's one of the reason you might want to play our game. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for all
thank you.
of your answers. Like, it's very interesting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, both professors. Okay, I think the report is already in Moodle, right? So the committee will be marking the report in the system then. Okay. Well, any other comments from the professors?
I have no more. Thank you.
I don't have any comments. I look forward to seeing the next steps of their progress.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kap.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so well, so I think we are finished for now for this group. Right. And I thank you both professors for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
And
Thank you.
Bye.
see you. Bye.
Bye.
โอเค มินิมัมสโคปลืมดูไปว่ะเพราะผมคิดว่าพวกเราทำได้นะแต่จริงๆอาจารย์ก็พูดมีเหตุผล
ครับผม
ผมคิดว่าพวกเราทำได้ แต่ว่ามันเรื่องคอนเทนต์มันอาจจะต้องกำหนดหน่อยว่าคอนเทนต์ทำมากแค่ไหนถึงถือว่าเป็นมินิมัมที่โชว์แมคานิกของเกมได้อะลองเอาไปคิดดูแล้วกัน
คิดว่า
แต่
ตัว
เมื่อ
ละ
กี้
ค
มินิ
ร
มัมมันน่าจะมินไปหน่อย
ครับ
ครับ
จริงๆก็คิดว่าถ้าตามระบบที่มีครบอะครับที่บอกว่าตัวละครก็จะมีตัวหลากหลายคิดว่าจะมีสัก2ตัวอย่างน้อยให้เห็นถึงว่า2 สไตล์ว่าจะเป็นสไตล์ offensive หรือว่าจะเป็นสไตล์ที่ gather information อย่างน้อยก็ต้องมีสัก2
พ
ตั
อ
ว
ไหว
คิด
อย่างนั้นพ
ป
อ
ระมา
ไหว
ณนั้นแล้วก็สกิลที่บอกว่าเป็นสกิลการ์ดที่บอกว่าเลือกมา enhance อย่างน้อยก็ต้องมี enhance สกิลของคาแรคเตอร์สัก1อันนะครับให้มันรู้สึกว่าเลือกมา enhance ได้อย่างอื่นก็จะเป็น buff หรือว่า passive ประมาณนี้
ใช่
ก็จะเป็นประมาณนั้น แล้วก็ปืนอย่างน้อยก็ต้องมีสักปืน2 ปืนที่ดรอปจากมินิบอสมันต้องดรอปได้สักปืนหนึ่งครับคิดว่าจริงๆคิดว่าประมาณนั้น
อันนั้นโอเค คือขอให้มีทุก
ครับ
อันน่ะ ขอให้มีทุกอัน
ครับ
แต่ว่าอันหนึงก็อย่ามีแค่อย่างเดียว มีสัก
ครับ
2-3 อย่าง เพราะว่าไม่งั้นมันจะมองไม่เห็นว่าวาไรตี้ในการเล่นเป็นไงเนาะ
ครับ
โอเค ถ้างั้นวันนี้ก็คงโอเคมั้ง เดี๋ยวพวกอาจารย์คงเข้าไปให้คะแนนอีกแหละนะ
ครับ
โอ้ เสร็จแล้วเย่ก็เหลืองานอื่นอีกอ๋อ
ใช่เยอะ
โอเค งั้นเดี๋ยวจะเตรียมกลุ่มคนอื่นบ้าง โอเค พวกเราเรียบร้อย
ครับ ขอบคุณครั
นะ
บ
ขอบคุณครับ
ขอบคุณครับ
โอเค ของเราเป็นไงสไลด์ เดี๋ยวขอลืมไปต้องปิด